Yeah, we're kind of juggling a lot of things in the air today. Another developing story we're following for you on MSNBC Live. The New Jersey Supreme Court will allow a divorced father to decide if 7 frozen embryos should be kept in storage or destroyed. This ruling also upholds a lower court's decision that keeps the father from having the embryos implanted in another woman and thus preventing his ex-wife from becoming a mother against her will.
Science moving a lot of stories that we would not have seen years ago. Another one we're following closely today, a surrogacy battle involving a British woman carrying twins and a California couple who wanted just one child. Helen Beasley suing Charles Wheeler and Martha Berman. She says they backed out of their pregnancy deal after they found out she was carrying twins. Beasley says the couple wanted her to abort one of the fetuses, but she refused. The couple denies asking her to do that. Their attorney says the pregnancy contract did call for what's called a selective reduction if Beasley became pregnant with more than one fetus. Beasley says that was a verbal agreement and their request came too late.
At the point that they wanted me to reduce the twins, I was past the 12th week, and I said, you know, that I wouldn't do it. We had discussed reduction and reducing multiples, but I'd always been informed and was told that it would always be before the 12th week. So, you know, as far as I was concerned, they'd known about the twins for a few weeks, and, you know, they just left it far too late.
The couple's lawyer wouldn't say why her clients don't want the babies now, but she says they won't be abandoned. She says another family is lined up to take the twins when they are born. Surrogacy is an issue that involves a slew of legal, ethical, and emotional factors. Some states regulate the practice of surrogacy. Others have no laws at all. So how do couples and surrogate mothers ethically negotiate a contract to create a child? And what happens to kids at the center of these battles? We want to talk about that now. Joining us is Glenn McGee, a professor of bioethics at the University of Pennsylvania, and in New York, psychologist Robin Goodman. Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thanks.
Professor McGee, if I can start with you, what went wrong in this case involving the California couple?
Well, Lester, it's a classic case, a sort of kitchen sink case. We see this all the time in surrogacy. Two things went wrong. First, the couple that was trying to have a child through surrogacy apparently didn't understand all of the things that could happen in the course of a surrogate parenting. And so when it turned out, as it often does, that the surrogate mother who had the egg, contributed her genes in the form of the egg to the baby, was actually carrying more than one baby, the parents were sort of thrown for a loop. They had only planned to have one child, and as often happens, they had exhausted their savings, their life savings on their reproductive planning, didn't have enough money for two, didn't want to have two for whatever reason, and so they pulled the plug. And that set into motion a whole variety of different kinds of discussions that, frankly, we're having only because there are no laws and procedures that guide us in the United States.
Well, in fact, there was a contract here. And, Robin, let me ask you, when there is a contract, it becomes obviously a business relationship, but can you mentally think of it during this 9 months as a business relationship?
Well, what they believe is that when it's a mother who feels like she's just being like the transporter, she's not having this actual attachment to the fetus as if it's her own. But what you see is you can't predict always how you're going to feel when you are in the situation until you're in that situation on either side. But what we've done is now we've taken a natural process where, you know, whatever happens, happens. Boy, girl, short, tall. And we've now, in some ways, tried to micromanage it both scientifically, and what we need to do is, at this point it seems, have some regulations to monitor it legally and protect the rights of children now, I guess, when they're not even children yet.
Glenn, are you surprised we haven't seen more cases like this, given the fact that it's the natural instinct, obviously, to make decisions about your own body, and here's a case where you're essentially signing your rights away?
Well, yeah, I'm surprised that we aren't covering more cases like this, but in my research at Penn, we've seen countless cases, beginning with the Davis versus Davis frozen embryo divorce case years ago, which the New Jersey Supreme Court is recapitulating today. The bottom line is we're not in the model of the birds and the bees anymore. anymore. The United States, with or without reproductive technology, is now a world with new families. We've got people who have 2 moms and 4 dads, and this kind of contract attempts to kind of put a lid on what can happen in a surrogacy relationship. But what people are finding is that the contract isn't what counts. I mean, I completely agree with Dr. Goodman that what happens here is that while everyone has the best of intentions, the gestating mother or gestational carrier, whatever you want to call it, develops an attachment, doesn't want to see the developing fetus after 12 weeks terminated. The parents don't know what they want, and now they're saying that they can essentially circumvent the whole adoption process and pick their own family to take this child, who, remember, has the husband's sperm.
Earlier this morning, we interviewed a surrogate mom, also the couple that hired her, essentially, to carry their child. She talked about this emotional bond, how she feels about that little boy, and the fact that there's still a relationship. Let's listen.
When you're carrying someone else's child, you know the decision is somebody else's to make, but you also know that both parties agree that the outcome is to have a baby. And that's what we set out to do, and that's what happened. I get phone calls and emails, pictures and updates, and I enjoy every bit of it.
So she still keeps track of her child. Robin, is that a good thing or a bad thing for the child, that there is this other mother out there?
In some ways, we can look to what's been happening in the world of adoption. And more, there's the idea that you have open adoptions. And that, in fact, when you try to hide something from children and keep it a secret, it makes them feel that there's something to be ashamed of. The reality is, children are physically, technically born the same way. They have to be in a womb. And then what you want to separate out is that process from the process of actually raising a child and being a parent to a child. And children go through a natural course of curiosity about where did I come from. We have a lot more answers to that question than we used to. But where did I come from, and how do I feel about you as my mom and my dad, are still questions that have very good answers, that are partly based on how you have experienced your mother and father who raised you.
Glenn, is it better to lay it out from the beginning, how
Absolutely.
This relationship will continue once the baby's born?
Absolutely, yes. But I want to point out that that's not what happens in reproductive technology. My research group did a study, and we found that 90% of couples who use sperm donation, for example, indicate before the time that they do the process that they plan to never tell the child. Most of the reproductive technologies that we now use make it possible to have the equivalent of a closed adoption. In fact, it's even weirder than that, because in many of these cases, the people who are involved in bringing the child into existence, like the surrogate mom, are actually genetically a parent to the child. And I think we've definitely missed the boat on that. This is clearly an area where there should be law, state law and federal law.
This is a discussion that we will have to end, but I want to thank both of you, Professor Glenn McGee, Dr. Robin Goodman, for joining us here. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
And still to come, the latest on the American woman being held in